our top 5 fantasy targets for your draft. And we're going to go ahead and list our top 5 and give a little bit of case for each player.
I'm going to dive into Derrick Henry first.
Henry, jump pass, touchdown!
A lot of people are concerned about his age. He's heading into year 30, right? He's going to get hurt. He's going to fall off, X, Y, Z, and the other. Derrick Henry is the LeBron James of running backs, okay? He's bigger, faster, stronger than any other quarterback or running back we've ever seen. He is just huge. And I honestly think with a team that loves to run the football and an offensive line that's much improved compared to what he saw in Tennessee, and an actual threat at quarterback in Lamar Jackson, it's going to make things easier for Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is used to be against loaded boxes, 8-man, just focused on stopping Derrick Henry, and that's it. That now that there's an extra wrinkle of, oh, my quarterback can take it and go. Oh, Mark Andrews running down the seam to catch a 15-yard, comeback route or hook pass. Like they have more weapons in Baltimore, as well as a fantastic run game system that Derrick Henry is just going to eat. It's going to be a lot easier for him. And he's falling to the late second, early third round as one of those elite running backs in a position group that arguably doesn't have much depth. So you could pick him up possibly in the third round if your league mates don't know what they're doing, and he could be your RB1.
I have Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Fake to Jahmyr Gibbs. Deep throw from Goff. Down the sideline, St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown in a foot race. Eyes on the end zone. Cuts it back. St. Brown is all the way. Touchdown, Detroit.
And if you can get him in your first round, because he's not really going top 3, ESPN has him as wide receiver 4, so he's really going in that second half of the first round. I think if you can get him to be your main guy to carry your team in a PPR league, because we are talking about just basic standard normal PPR, which is what most people tend to do. I just think he's going to be super consistent. I mean, he was last year. He gets lots of targets for the Lions, and I think there's a chance because of that in a PPR league, he could end up as wide receiver number 1. He's going to get the work. He's going to get a lot of targets, a lot of receptions, and, as he is my only top tier guy I put on this list, but I think if you can get him early, that is a good base and a good foundation to build your team around.
Okay, so your number 1 target, according to value, is Amon-Ra St. Brown. My number 1 is Derrick Henry, just because of where he's going. And the running back position is kind of not very deep.
Yeah, yeah. And then my number 2 guy who I would go for based on value would be Garrett Wilson.
Garrett Wilson. Wow! What a catch! Touchdown, Jets! That kid's amazing.
Of the New York Jets, ESPN has him as the number 8 wide receiver. I think if you miss out on a top wide receiver early in your draft, or maybe you go with one of the running backs in Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, Christian McCaffrey, Garrett Wilson should have his best season of his career, especially if Aaron Rodgers is healthy. I mean, we saw what Devontae Adams did with Aaron Rodgers. Garrett Wilson only had 3 touchdowns last year. That number is going to go up a lot more with Aaron Rodgers playing. So, if you go running back early, or, you miss out on a top tier wide receiver, or, your draft goes all funky, if you need an elite wide receiver in the second round, he tends to go late second round in most of these drafts. I would go ahead and I would target Garrett Wilson.
I have him as my number 2 as well, especially because you can snag him in the second round, right? He was 4th in overall targets last year as a receiver, but the production wasn't there because I was throwing him the football. and I'm not a very good quarterback, much like whatever the heck was going on in New York. So Wilson, Aaron Rodgers has a history of targeting his number one guy and having him explode fantasy-wise. If Aaron Rodgers is 80% of what he normally is, I expect a Davante Adams light version out of Garrett Wilson. He's going to get the ball thrown to a lot, and he's talented enough to capitalize on those. And he can be your wide receiver one. I expect the potential to be a top 5 fantasy wide receiver next year, and you can grab him early to middle of the second round in a 10 team PPR league. So he is definitely my one, very high on my draft board because of where he's going. You don't have to spend quite as much draft equity as you do targeting Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, who have questions at the quarterback spot. Burrow's injured again. Justin Jefferson, JJ McCarthy just ended the season because he needs to get surgery on his meniscus. I'm going to be throwing Justin Jefferson the football, right? So I really love that pick because of where you can grab him.
Yeah, absolutely. And then moving on to number 3, I put David Montgomery here for
David Montgomery, the back. Bouncing outside. Head down the sideline. Goes Montgomery. He's going to go in for a Lions touchdown.
the Detroit Lions. Mostly because there's been news recently. It's at least confirmed that Jahmyr Gibbs has a hamstring injury, but he may have possibly torn his ACL, which would mean Montgomery would jump up these draft boards, and he's going to go a lot higher. But as of right now, he would be a real steal if you can get him in round 4 or later, especially if, let's just say this injury, he doesn't tear his ACL and Gibbs is off and on with a hamstring injury all year. Montgomery's going to be super valuable. Detroit loves to run the ball. You saw what Jamal Williams did in Detroit. They gave him all the goal line touches. Montgomery could have a similar role, especially if Gibbs is that injured. And, I would just, at worst case, he's a good handcuff running back to have, just in case, as I mentioned, the injury, but just adds depth to your running back room, especially if you decide to go wide receiver heavy early.
Yeah, if you go hero RB, draft a top tier running back early and then try to stack the receiver position for the next 2 or 3 rounds, draft 3 consecutive receivers. Montgomery is a perfect hero running back draft, especially with the news that Gibbs might be missing time / struggling to get on the field all year, especially behind this offensive line and the way the Lions play football. They love to run. So that would be a steal. I don't have him on my list, but I can't hate on that pick. I actually have Travis Etienne.
In your skill position group are young players.
Pitch play here to Etienne. This is going to be a first down and more. Etienne off and running. Breaking a tackle. Etienne, touchdown.
As another running back that I think is being really undervalued here. He is another great RB1 candidate that you can grab in the 4th round. Right. He was RB3 last year in both production and overall volume. And I don't expect much to change as far as the scheme the Jaguars are trying to run on offense. I mean, what other playmaker do they really have on the Jaguars? They don't have a crazy receiving room. There's not much running back competition for touches. So he's going to get used like crazy. And I don't really expect much fall off. Right. He's going to be a top 10 running back, in my opinion, and you can grab him in the 4th round. So yeah, crazy value pick.
I like that value pick for sure. He's definitely got the production. 4th most valuable player. I am a big fan of taking quarterbacks later, not jumping early and grabbing a QB, especially in PPR leagues. So if you're going to wait and take a quarterback late, or you want a high upside pick for a quarterback, talking round 8, maybe later, you stacked up on all your skill positions, and you go QB, I say Caleb Williams.
On 2nd and 10, this is a shot position here from the 48. He's looking downfield, nothing there. Spins away, throws on the move. It is caught!
ESPN currently has him ranked as the 13th projected fantasy quarterback. Like, look, he just has so many weapons around him. He's a running threat, and he should have success as a rookie. I mean, you can draft him later, and there's a good chance he just goes and he balls out for you. Because so many QBs can be so close, and they all really have high point production for the most part. But there's a chance because of the weapons he has and his rushing ability that he gets a little more touchdowns than some of those other guys, and he's going to be there later when you can stack up on more wide receivers and more running backs.
I don't hate the pick. I didn't really consider a quarterback for this list, mostly because of how loaded the position is and how many great quarterbacks you can get in the 7th, 8th, 9th rounds of drafts, right? I mean, I got Dak Prescott with my 9th overall pick, and he was QB 2 or 3 last year. You know what I mean? There's just so much volume or readily available talent at the quarterback position that I just didn't really consider that pick. I don't hate it. My one pushback on Caleb Williams is he's a rookie.
Yeah.
Right. And he's in Chicago. And those two things rarely mix well. I know that's, hearsay or stipulation, but I don't know. I've liked what I've seen out of him in the one preseason game he's played. But I wouldn't expect him to perform much better than Jordan Love or, even a Jared Goff, maybe at that position fantasy wise. So I don't know. I don't have much stock in quarterbacks.
And that's fair. Who was your 4th most valuable fantasy player?
My 4th most valuable fantasy player is another running back. No, running back heavy here. Is Alvin Kamara.
Zone. It's been a struggle all year. Carr, short. Kamara inside the 10, inside the 5, lunging for the touchdown.
He is similar to Derrick Henry, that a lot of people are worried about how old he is, age 29. He's got a little bit of injury history, right? But I got him in the 5th round of my draft that I did, and he's basically a glorified receiver, much like Travis Etienne in a PPR league. Kamara is a must-add, especially due to where he's going. He's going late 4th round, early 5th round. He's gonna get you 5 check down catches a game. He's a lock for 15 points every week because of how he's used in the receiving game. He's a glorified receiver that you can put at the running back position. And I think he's got at least one more good season left in him. So,
yeah, absolutely. Whenever he's healthy, he's definitely a guy who you want to have on your fantasy team. His only question really is health, it feels like, but everything else checks the boxes for fantasy purposes. Moving on to my last player on my list was Ladd McConkey, the 2nd round rookie from Georgia who got drafted by the Chargers. And my whole thing was about this was he's basically an upside player. Someone has to be the Chargers wide receiver number 1. And Herbert is the QB, and he's a good quarterback. So someone is bound to have success on that team. I believe it would be McConkey out of everyone else in that room. He should get a good amount of targets, right? He played in like an NFL ready type system at Georgia. And so I believe Harbaugh is going to become a fan of him. I believe he's going to be that type of guy that comes in and does his job. And I think he's going to lead the Chargers receivers in targets. And he would be a guy I'm looking for late in the draft to add as a potential upside guy, maybe a league winner if he has a solid season and outperforms his ESPN rank 46 projection.
I can't hate that. I don't really know much about the receiving core for the Chargers. The whole news and the splash was they're getting a lot more running back depth They've made a conscious effort to transform the offense to make it more balanced, right? And I mean, he could have a great year and he could establish himself as wide receiver number 1. He could also be wide receiver 3 for that very same team. It's a little bit of a risky pick. My league winner, similar boat, would be Christian Watson.
Love stepping up, throwing in. Zone Watson! Touchdown Packers!
His big question has been health. But when healthy, he is clearly Jordan Love's number 1 option. And I think he's a must draft because he's going in the 10th, 11th round. He can win your league. He is going to be in an offense that is going to perform really well. And he's the number 1 guy. And we've seen it in the past. Whenever he's healthy, he's Jordan Love's favorite target. So that's who I have as my 5th and final league-winning fantasy pick. It's a little bit riskier than the other guys that I had on this list, but I just like him ahead of some of the guys that are going late in the draft.
Yeah, that's a really good pick. I had him his rookie year when he broke out for all those touchdowns. You know that upside and potential is there with Christian Watson. Let us know what you guys think of our fantasy value picks here. Who are you guys targeting in your fantasy draft? And if you've already had your draft, let us know who you picked. Maybe you're like me, already had your draft and you picked Gibbs as one of your running backs and are scared that he's going to miss the year.